Yeah, this is a weird video because I'm going to do it in a bunch of pieces, and so you'll just have to bear with me. Okay, first piece is what this video is actually about, which is I'm building a Manitou Comanche. Okay, I got mine from JS Scale. Just type that in and you'll get JS Scale. You can get it direct from Manitou, but the nice part is that JS Scale does all of this hard work for you, and they do actual body work, so they will put the pieces together and make you the complete body. If you want it only in primer, they'll do that. If you want it finished completely or rusted out or whatever, weathered or whatever, they do it all. They do interior, they do the whole thing. The point is, this video, we're going to actually, I got the kit, I got the Comanche Bed Kit from JS Scale, and we're going to talk about the bed kit. We're going to talk about the process of putting the pieces together from the Manitou design. We're going to talk about what this thing is. We're going to talk about what this thing is and how these go together and how to do that. And so there's going to be a few different components. I'll try to spend just enough time on each one that you guys will get a feel for how to put the product together successfully, because I guarantee that if you do it right, you will have a body that's as strong as a molded piece of plastic. Okay, I guarantee it. This stuff is incredibly strong. Let's have a look at some of the details. Okay, we're digging in here. First of all, let me show you some quick differences between the ABS part. This is the molded body front for the Comanche. There's some key differences between this and the 3D printed part. Obviously, you're going to get detail. You're still going to get opportunity for different kinds of finishes. They're both plastics. But one of the key differences is that the joint on the ABS part is quite smooth, and the joint that you will get on some of the faces of the 3D printed part is not smooth. It's actually kind of a, if it's not the printed bottom, so this is the bottom of the part, the way that the orientation of the print is, this is the bottom, so this is flat on the glass when it's printed. This is super flat because it's on the glass, and this edge this edge here is not super flat, partly because it contours with the body, but also partly because it's the print edge. Okay, so the printer is going this direction and it goes around and around and around and it goes up and up and up like this. And so there's actually a bit of a roll on the edge here. And you need to sand that off. So, I mean, the simple thing to do is simply just get a piece of, I'm using 100, okay? I'm using 100 paper. And basically you're going to put the part flat on the paper and then just go back and forth a little bit. And all you're really doing is roughing up the surface so it can be glued or flattened. Okay, now on this part here where it's a little bit more rough because of the print corner, you're going to do the same thing. Simply hold the part flat. You don't need to go like a lot of motion, just a little bit. Keep some constant pressure. And then this section of the body here curves up. It's not the same plane as this. You can see there's a little bit of a taper here, so this has to also get held down. Hold that down in the right flat plane on the paper. Give that a bit of a sanding. Now what you're going to get out of that is you're actually kind of roughing the surface here. You can see where the paper dirt's actually transferred onto the white print. That is going to be your glue surface to join the body half with the new printed tail. Okay? Now, a couple other things I want to talk about. Fitment for the parts. The box is very much the same as this. Very much the same as his Bronco body, very much the same as I expect pretty much all of his products from Manitou's design. He's made it so that parts interlock, okay? So what I mean is that there's a little bump here. You see this little bump here, right there. This little bump fits into the socket right here. Okay, so there's a little printed socket here. on the inside face, and then there's a little printed bump here on this outside face, and these two are going to fit together like this. Okay, so when you actually assemble the parts, it's kind of like there's a ball and socket on just about everything, like literally just about everything. So the way that this piece goes on the bottom, there is no ball and socket because the two faces are both printed on the glass, so they're perfectly flat. You just line up the body line and you glue it together and you're done. So this is really easy. No fuss there. You just line it up, okay, and put your glue on. You don't need a socket and a ball for that, or a pin and a socket. Now this, you can see the way that this was printed. The inside face here is pretty rough. It's pretty rough because the print orientation was like this. This was the glass here. So the glass was touching here. This was all printed support material inside. And then the finished edge on top is actually the top of the roof of the Jeep. So this part will go here like this, and you can line up the body lines right there. And that will be very easy to get smooth and sand off. Okay, so there's a reason why he does a very good job making sure the print orientation works for the assembly really well. So I approve of that for sure. There's a window rail in here. There's a lip inside here, so when you put the back glass in the window, there's something for it to catch onto. And there's also a printed lip on the outside here for the trim ring that goes around the back window. You can see it there. So although this may look rough inside, it's basically irrelevant because it's inside the back of the roof, inside the vehicle. It goes in here, okay, so who cares? And the way that Manitou did all the print orientations for each different section, they're all that way. If there's any kind of roughness in the material, it's irrelevant. It's in a spot, it doesn't matter. You're gonna want to clean this up though, okay, before you start gluing parts together. So basically all I'm gonna do to clean this up, if it's not an area where I can just quickly rough sand it like that, then I take, I'm using just a construction knife, like this regular carpenter's knife, and I'm just scraping it. Basically, I'm just making a scraping motion along the face of the part where it's rough and taking the high spots off. That's it. So this is all I'm going to do here. And if you go on a bit of an angle, sometimes a different angle than the part is, than the part print, then you can just sort of scrape it off. And this works great to get all the high spots off. We'll get in there in the window rail. So you probably can't see that too well, but I'll try to show it off here. I've just scraped the junk off, the high spots off, so now it's actually quite smooth. There's quite a bit of easy detail there, you can see, okay? Now, because this was on the bottom of the print, there's support material stuck inside this square here where the socket is for this bed end, for the the cab end. Okay, so the way that this is going to fit on here, you can tell right away that this joint right here is not actually going to be smooth when it's glued. There's a gap. But the gap is because of this pin and socket here. Okay? That's a big deal to know. And I found when I was building the bed, which I'll show you in a minute, this happened quite a bit when I was building the bed. I had to clear out the socket part or simply just cut the pin off. Okay, so now what I've done on this side is I just simply cut the pin off because I can align this successfully myself. I don't need the pin. Okay, so on this side here, I cut the pin off, and you can see that that's going to match up really, really, really clean. No problem. And instead of spending all my time trying to clean out the socket and refit the pin and all that stuff, I just simply cut the pin right off. Okay, so that's an option. Now, with all that said, let me cut this other pin off here, and then we will actually glue this top section on here so I can show you how I'm doing it. I'm just going to snip that off, just like that. Make sure it's flat. Scrape it up a little bit. And now, one of the things that's going to be, you're going to have a lot of discussion in the clubs and forums and stuff about how to how much work has to go into sanding the 3D printed material. Like this is a PLA print. Because it's done in additive printing, there's going to be some edges that are going to have to be filed and sanded, as you know. But I have some tricks for that I'll show you in a second that really make it a lot easier. Now, let's just get some ideas about glue here. I want to tell you that the PLA glues really well with a proper CA. Make sure that you have one of these sorts of brands. I mean, I happen to like these, the BSI stuff that's made in America. I really, really like this CA. It's a pure cyanoacrylate. Okay, the medium stuff has its place for doing sort of quick gap filling sort of material that's where you've got a space, but I would suggest that in this situation, gluing these Manitou bodies together, you probably only need the thin, but you're going to use a lot of it, alright? So keep that in mind. And the other product that you absolutely must have is a proper CA activator. This is a Zip Kicker. I think we've had this can for probably 40 years here. And so, you know, this one is besides being exceptionally old, it's a good quality. Like Zip used to make a bunch of really good quality CAs. So what we're going to do now is line this up. We know exactly how this is going to go on the truck now. So we've got the window rail here that we can use for alignment and the edge of the body. So all I'm going to really do is hold this like this with my hands. I'm going to sort of bend myself around here to make this work and hold that. I'm going to align this the best I can. Get the window rail lined up. Make sure the other side is also lined up. And I'm focusing on this glue joint over here now, okay? So with this aligned, this is how I did the box too. This is I'm using this as an example, but fitting the box or fitting a Bronco body, it would be exactly the same. So now that I've got this lined up successfully here, I can tell you just by holding the parts together that this will be a really easy sand to do the finishing work. There isn't much of a lip here at all. It looks really, really good. Okay? Now, with that said, what I'm going to do is touch this thing with a tiny little bit of the thicker CA. This is the medium. Okay? I'm going to put a little bit of medium CA right on this back joint here on the outside corner. Also in an easy place where I can sand it really easily. Okay? I'm going to put a little bit of CA there. It's thick enough that it won't soak in too much. And then I'm going to hit it with this kicker, which immediately turns it yellow. Okay? And there's a solid joint. Now that seems like, how could that possibly be true? But it is. So that right there will never move ever again. And that gives me that little tiny dot gives me the chance to move over to the other side here now. And on this side, I can now officially line this up well, get it held in place, and I'll put a proper dot of CA on this side as well. Okay? Now I would encourage you guys to do this. The CA sands really easily, especially if you're going to use a Dremel drum sander or something to get the initial sanding hit done. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of CA on there. And then I'm going to activate that right away so I don't have to sit here all day and hold it. And you can see that's just, there's a little tiny edge right there that's been CA'd. Okay, now I'm done. So I've got the parts in place, and now I'm going to actually fill the joint. Okay, so the idea of this the idea of this process is that when you're done, you have a single unit, a single piece that's so solid that there's just no chance of it ever coming apart. Okay, that's the idea. Now I'm just going to hold this kind of together like this, so it's really easy to align. Everything lines up so nicely here. And now I'm going to switch over to the thin CA, and using the thin I'm going to actually pour this right into the joint here. Okay, I'm not on the back face anymore. I'm going to do the side. So I'm going to put some thin CA right in there and drip a bit of it in there. Part of the reason I'm using the thin is because it'll soak into the crack. Okay, it wicks right into the crack, and that means I have much less sanding to do when it comes time to do the detail work on the body. Okay, so there's the joint there. It's been hit with the activator and it's all filled right in, and of course it dries instantly. Now on the inside of this joint, I'm going to do the same thing. Now I have the chance to actually, it's almost full. I'm going to see if you can check that out in a video. This section right here, right inside here, this is actually almost full of CA. I don't know if you can see that in the video. I'm kind of hoping you can, because the CA has almost come through the backside already. So basically the joint, I know, is completely full now of glue. I'm going to put a little tiny line of CA inside here again. Just one little drop is all I need. And because it's thin, I can kind of knock it around a little bit and kind of get it to soak in where I want it. And then I'll give that a little bit of an activator hit. And then you can see in here, that's completely filled in now. Okay, so this stuff is not really that hard to work with. Now, this will never come off. I mean, never, ever, 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 ever come off. That is literally, this is made into one piece now. The PLA glues in its entirety as a single unit when you put CA on it, and it stays in place if you touch it with some activator. So now on this side here, we're going to do the same thing, quick and easy. And then we'll get into the finishing techniques, which is actually also surprisingly simple. I'm going to put some CA in there. That's some thin CA. A little shot of activator, just enough to get it to stay so it doesn't run all over the place. And then I'll wick some CA down into the joint on this side. That's looking really good. Give that a little kick. There we go. And we're done. So there we go. Now this is like, we're done. I mean, this is one solid piece. For the sake of the internet, okay, for no other reason really, because I already know this is strong enough, I'm going to try to break this off, and if it breaks off, I'll glue it back on. But I want you guys to see what's required to actually bust this off now, okay? The CA has only been, it's not even really 24 hours cured or anything. I'm sure inside it's probably still wet, but this is so solid now that you should be able to just, you know, I'm totally trying to bend this over now. Like, look at this. Okay, I'm flexing the entire part with these two that I just glued together. Can you see that? Okay, there is no more flex. Like, this joint will not crack. It's just impossible for the joint to crack. I did this when I was building the bed too, because I wanted to make sure that the Comanche bed wasn't going to collapse in the middle of the trail somewhere in 5 pieces, you know. So there's a tutorial on gluing these parts together. And now before you glue this on the body, you can just put this face down on your sandpaper. Give this a little bit of a scratch again, so that you've got a nice rough surface for the CA to glue into. Okay, and that just smooths off the joint here at the top of the bed. At the top of the cab, sorry. And then these two parts are going to get glued together like this. Part of the reason why I think it's really important for you guys to use a high quality CA instead of the discount, you know, super glue from the dollar store is because you end up with a product that will bond a lot better to the ABS. There's a lot of the CAs do not bond very well on the ABS, and you need something that's going to work for both materials here. And I strongly recommend you get a quality CA. I've been in love with this BSI stuff, but that's what we happen to have. You guys will probably have this blue CA with a different tag on it because Bob Smith is bringing this in and puts it in certain hobby shops, and so, you know, but basically this blue stuff is the good stuff. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Now, let's move over to the box. I want to show you what I did with the box here. So the box has been assembled. I decided to leave the tailgate off for now, but the box has been assembled. I used exactly the same methods that you just saw there. The difference is that I wanted to show you, I'm starting to work on the finishing here, so I wanted to show you the finishing parts. Now when I put this box seam together right here, I checked it with I went over it with the knife. I made sure that the square corners where they were going to meet were still square. I made sure that the edges where the joint of the box cap goes onto the bedside, I made sure that was flat before I glued it. There's a few things you do need to do on these to make sure. For instance, if you look right inside here, you can sort of see here that there's a line that goes down where the face of the box here, this face, joins up with the bedside. Now you can see that's a square corner right there. And because of the way that additive 3D printing is, the corner's not actually square. In this edge, there's actually a little round edge inside, okay? Right in there, it's actually round. You need to trim that out with your knife before you put the parts together. Like, make sure that this edge right here is 100% square, okay? Go over the corners with a knife, square off the corners before you glue stuff together so that you have a good match at the bottom and a good match on the other face, and there's no material stuck in the corner. You have to do that to make sure that this is successful. But other than that, the parts, as you can clearly see here, the parts have been so well designed that they actually just fit together like a puzzle. It's not that hard to put this together. Now, on this side here, you can see where I did the CA joint. I used the thicker CA. I touched it over the joint after I had held it together in the right place to match the body line. I shot it with the Activator, and now I have a tiny little bit of CA to just file off. I can flat board sand that and get that off, and then I'll have a nice finish here. You'll also notice that there's a seam in the bed and whatnot too, but what I want to show you right now is the finish, okay? So if we look inside the box, you can see in here that the inner fender section here, this has been glued with one little shot of thin primer over top. I'm not using build primer at all. This is just thin regular primer, like what I used on the cab, okay? Now you'll see in here that there's print lines on it. After I did a tiny little bit of just scraping with the knife, I got it to look like this. I fixed all the joints here so they were super square and tight. So when I glued it, there was very little gap. You'll notice here inside the back of the bed there's a bit of a rough edge here from being on the back side of the print. That's fine. And then you'll notice here that there's like a seam going around the bed here all the way around, okay? So I just want you to see what the finish is like on it. Now, this was one coat of primer, okay? I've done no sanding on the box at all. If we turn this around, you can see there's a massive difference here. Because on this side, I've done like 7 coats of thin primer, okay? This is a thin, super thin, like not a high build primer, it's just standard thin primer. But this side, I've done no sanding, and on this side I put like 7 coats of primer all inside here, in the joint, in the bed floor. If you want to see the differences, I mean, just have a look at that right there. So let me see if I can get this in the frame perfectly. So this section here has only 1 coat of primer. You can see how there's still print lines on it and such. And then over here, this has 7 coats on it, and it's almost completely filled in all of the print weirdness. The difference is just astonishing here. So that is almost ready for paint. I've done no sanding on it at all, none. And you can see this side has much more to go before it's ready for paint. So, what does all that mean? What it means is you end up with an opportunity here to put together almost a puzzle, a 3D printed puzzle. You get a really solid piece of 3D car body. Okay, this thing is so crazy strong, it just is ridiculous. Using the CA and the Activator, and this method works really well. And then for as far as finishing goes, to pre-finish the body, I'm recommending some high build primer or several coats of a thin primer. Let them flash in between so that you're doing an actual primer build up. You're getting material laid on, and the primer will sand very easily if it's fully cured. So that has a really good stick on the body. You can paint this now really well, and all of the finishing work after Manitou's incredible interlocking design, there's very minimal finishing work to do if you get a good coat of primer on the body. That's the key. Now, I absolutely hate using filler, those little putties that you put in and then you have to let them dry and sand them off and try to squish them in the cracks and stuff. I hate that. I will always fill the cracks on a body with either plastic or primer buildup or CA. Okay, I hate using that putty stuff because the putty typically falls out of the hole all the time, and I hate that. I'm going to continue to do the body filling with CA or with extra coats of primer before I do my finish coat. And very excited to get this together. We are well on our way. Thanks again for watching this, and I hope that helps you with your assembly and finishing, pre-finishing work for any of your Manitou 3D printed bodies. And I want to make another distinction here about the way that this is designed here. So let's have a look at this from a different angle. There's one more thing I really have to say about the 3D printing that coming from JS Scale and Manitou, and I have to make a distinction between the way that prints are made. This is really important if you're watching this video right till this point and then you're still trying to make a decision, you know, do I use this type of body or this type of body? Let's just talk about the differences. A lot of the time, the way that designs are done is a shell, the outside of the body is made. You know, like this can be done by, you can actually 3D design the outside of the body. And then typically what happens with ABS parts like this is that they're designed to be very thin. Okay, in ABS, what you do is you take the outside shape and you make the wall thickness, you know, 1 millimeter for example, and that 1 millimeter example follows the entire contour all the way around the body. So basically what you've got is 1 millimeter thick window post, 1 millimeter thick roof, 1 millimeter thick door, 1 millimeter thick fender, 1 millimeter thick grill. All of that is typically the way that a lot of these bodies are designed when they are designed for molded purposes, because you don't want a thickness of material here, that otherwise it would just be solid 10 pounds of ABS plastic, and nobody wants that. Now, there's a big difference between the design for this type of a body, this type of production, and this type of production, okay? Because this body was specifically designed for 3D print. Because it's made for 3D print, you already know, as a designer, you already understand that the body is going to be printed thick and hollow, okay? In additive material, and additive 3D printing, which is what all these parts are made out of, this thing weighs almost nothing. This Bronco body weighs almost nothing. I'm not exaggerating either. It's an incredibly light body. And the reason is because inside here is actually a mesh of honeycomb full of air. That's what's inside here. It's the outside surface as a solid. The inside and all the ribbing is a solid. The joints and all the faces in between are all a solid. But then anytime that there's a thickness like this, where the material is thick, that's actually full of air and like a honeycomb web inside. That's the way these are made. And they're not only is it made that way because that's the style of printer that it was printed on, but it was also made that way in its actual design. Okay, so like for instance, the Bronco body was specifically designed by Manitou, like the Comanche bed, to have the details that you need, but it's designed to be structurally thick, heavy duty, and it will always hold its shape. Okay, now that's important because if you look at this hood, for instance, you can see on this hood, this is my Bronco hood, the thickness of the hood. And when you see the Bronco hood, you're thinking, well, that hood must weigh like a half a pound. No, it doesn't. This thing is so incredibly light, it weighs as much as like a paper envelope. It's almost weightless. That matters because if you decide you're going to go with a 3D printed body, I can only recommend that you get a body that is specifically designed for additive printing. It's got beef to it, okay? This thing is its own superstructure. It's got tons of strength. It's ridiculously well designed so that when it's printed, it's almost weightless. It's full hard body solid, and the thing is incredibly strong. You do not need to build any sort of structure within this to keep the plastic in place, okay? There are a whole bunch of body prints out there which are only shells. It's like the body was actually, it seems like the bodies are designed for molding where the material is very strong, but then the 3D printer guys are actually printing them with additive material, which is not a strong material in this thickness. And so you end up with a body that's very fragile, that will easily crack. There's no superstructure inside it to actually keep the body, you know, the fenders in line and the doors from, you know, getting wonky or warped or whatever. So please pay attention when but the 3D printing industry there's so much going on now that we absolutely have to keep talking about it. And we use a ton of 3D printing. We use nylon, we use additive, FDM, and SLS and different kinds. And the differences between them it's vast, it's huge, and please pay attention. Not all 3D printed bodies are going to turn out the same. Okay? Please pay attention to that. And if you're going to go with a 3D printed body that is designed like the Manitou bodies, where there's superstructure in it, where it's hollow, it's got full faces inside and out, it's not just a thin 1mm shell all the way around. This kind of 3D printed body will last you the life of your vehicle, I guarantee. This is incredibly strong, very well designed, easy to put together, and the finish will come out fantastic. I encourage you to find body printers who are doing their work with this kind of a method, not a thin shell. Very big difference in the way the body will turn out for you. So please, please, please do not shy away from the price of these, because they're so well made. It's easily compatible with an ABS hard body molded. Good stuff. Thanks for watching.